Most salespeople don't fail because they're bad at selling. They fail because somewhere along the way, they start lying to themselves. Not big lies, small ones. Just enough to close the deal, just enough to make the moment a little easier. But every time that happens, something inside of you starts to break. And most salespeople don't even realize it's happening until years later when the damage is already done. 400 years ago, Shakespeare wrote one line that explains exactly why. I'm Josh, the sales guy, and today we're talking about the lie that destroys sales careers. This channel is about sales, influence, and becoming better at the craft. And this is Improve or Die Trying. There's a line in Shakespeare's Hamlet that's older than all of us. A father is giving advice to his son, and before the son leaves home, the father wants to tell him something. He's a powerful man, connected to the king, and he knows the world his son is walking into will be full of pressure. So he gives him one piece of advice, one line. This, above all, to thy own self be true. Most people that hear that line believe that it means be yourself. But that's not exactly what it means. What it really means is don't betray yourself. Because once you do, everything downstream starts to break. And in sales, that moment shows up in a very specific way. Because the lie that destroys most sales careers isn't the one that's told to the customer. It's the one told to ourselves. And the very next line after that quote says something even more important. If you're true to yourself, you can't be false to anyone else. That idea explains more about selling than most training ever will. Because every salesperson eventually faces the same choice. You can influence for clarity or you can manipulate for greed. Both can close deals, but only one lets you keep your integrity. And that's what this talk is about. Let me tell you why this line matters to me. Because before I ever worked in sales, I was a bartender. And one day a customer came back in after being gone for a while. He sits down and he says, "Hey, how was your trip to Jamaica?" Now, I don't remember ever telling him that I was going to Jamaica. But instead of admitting that, I played along to save face. And after he left, right there in that moment, I made a decision. I would never lie to a customer again. Not because of some higher moral reason, although that is an outstanding reason. But I did it because I realized something. I didn't want to be responsible for remembering my lies. Life gets a lot less complicated when you just tell the truth. You always know what you said, and you keep things clean. Now, fast forward a few years, and I end up in commission sales. And there, the pressure is real. Months can be slow, but bills, they never pause. And opportunities will show up where the easy move would make money. And in sales, there are a lot of ways to win doing the wrong thing. You can create urgency that isn't real. Push emotion past clarity. Gloss over a doubt that deserves attention. And the truth is, most of the time it works. That's the real temptation. But I learned something a long time ago. If I violate my own truth to get a sale, I didn't win. I just borrowed from myself. And that debt always comes true. And by the way, after more than 20 years of thinking about that moment, I'm almost positive that I never told that guy I was going to Jamaica. Never. He probably just had me confused with somebody else. But nonetheless, the impact, it was made. And that decision ended up shaping how I sell today. Now, here's where most salespeople get it wrong. They think the job is simple. Close the deal or lose the deal. So the pressure becomes about the outcome. the result, the number on the board. And when the pressure is framed that way, your judgment starts to bend. Things that should feel questionable start to feel practical. Things that should make you pause start to feel necessary. Because once the goal becomes get the deal no matter what, almost anything starts to feel justified. And that belief is where a lot of good salespeople slowly lose themselves. It's not all at once. It's one small compromise at a time. Being true to yourself isn't about pretending shortcuts don't exist. And it definitely isn't about being weak. It doesn't mean you stop trying. It means that you help the buyer make a decision that's best for them. You don't stop guiding the conversation. You're still selling. You're still influencing. You're still working towards the close. But you're doing it from a place that most salespeople never reach. You actually know who you are, and you're not afraid to be that honest person in front of the buyer. You're not afraid to tell the truth when the moment calls for it. You're not afraid to ask the hard questions or to challenge a belief that isn't helping them. And you're not afraid of the outcome, because once you stop fearing the outcome, something powerful happens. You become clear, calm, direct. You stop pushing and you start guiding. And buyers feel that difference immediately. Being honest doesn't make you weak. It makes you dangerous because you're no longer afraid of the outcome. So what does being true to yourself actually look like in real life? It rarely looks dramatic. It actually looks pretty quiet. It looks like slowing down when speeding up would be easier. It looks like asking the question that you know needs to be asked. It looks like telling the buyer the truth, even when silence would be easier. And it looks like challenging a belief that isn't helping them to make a good decision. It looks like guiding the conversation towards clarity instead of pressure. And yes, it looks like working towards the close. You are still selling. You are still influencing, but you're doing it honestly. You're doing it clearly, and you're doing it without fear, because when you're not afraid of the outcome, you can finally focus on helping the buyer to make the right decision. And those are the moments that tell you who you really are. So make no mistake. When you sell this way, you will close more business because clarity builds trust and trust closes deals. So here's the only challenge I care about. Before your next meeting, before your next call, before you walk into the next opportunity, pause and ask yourself one honest question. Am I about to act in a way that I can respect later? Not will this close, not will this work, and not will this be easier for me. Just this. Can I respect myself later? Because if you stay true to yourself, everything else at least has a chance to work. And if you don't, nothing really does. This above all, to thy own self be true. That line has stayed with me for a long time. Back when I was standing behind the bar, I realized something. I don't want to live a life where I have to remember my lies. That moment taught me something very simple. If you stay true to yourself, you can't be false to anyone else. Years later, when I found myself in sales, I realized the same principle still applied, because in every sales conversation, there is a line, On one side of that line is influence, and on that other side is manipulation. Influence brings clarity. It helps the buyer see the situation honestly. It helps them to make a decision that they can live with. Manipulation distorts reality to force an outcome. Both approaches can close deals, but they create very different kinds of professionals. The rule I choose to live by is simple: influence for clarity, never manipulate for greed. And when you live by that rule, the way you sell becomes very clear. Because the moment you betray yourself for an outcome, you didn't win. You just borrowed from yourself. And that debt will always come due. Sometimes it shows up as burnout. Sometimes it shows up as a high cancellation rate. And sometimes it shows up as quiet dissatisfaction, that feeling you just can't quite explain. That moment when you realize you got the result, but something about it just didn't feel right. Because deep down, you know you traded a piece of yourself to get it. And that's a terrible trade. But when you influence with honesty, something different happens. People don't feel pushed. They feel helped. They feel understood. They feel confident about making the decision they're making. And those are the decisions people remember, not because they're pressured, but because they were guided. And that kind of professional is the kind I choose to be. If this idea has resonated with you, do me a favor. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment below. I want to know one thing. Have you ever seen a moment where a salesperson crossed the line from influence into manipulation? I read every comment and would love to hear about your experiences. Because in this profession, there are only two options. You can either improve or you can die trying.